My name is Emily, and I'm 28 years old. I thought my life had turned into a fairy tale when I married Ryan, a 32-year-old man who seemed kind, supportive, and loving. We met through mutual friends, and he swept me off my feet with his charm. Everything about him seemed perfect: his manners, his sense of humor, and how much he talked about his close-knit family. But as they say, looks can be deceiving. After our wedding, Ryan asked me if we could move in with his mother, Sylvia. She was widowed a few years ago, and Ryan felt it was his responsibility to stay close and take care of her. He reassured me it would only be temporary, promising we'd soon move into our own home. Sylvia seemed warm and welcoming when I first met her, so I agreed. But once we moved in, things took a dramatic turn. The first few days in Sylvia's house were relatively smooth. She seemed eager to help us settle in and treated me kindly. However, it didn't take long for her true personality to emerge. She began giving me orders like, "Emily, wash the windows," or, "Emily, clean the kitchen now." Her tone was sharp, and she rarely said please or thank you. I chalked it up to her age and perhaps her loneliness, but the constant commands wore me down. One morning, as I was preparing breakfast, I noticed a man sitting at the dining table. I had never seen him before, and he was staring at me as if he'd been waiting for me to notice him. "Good morning," he said with a faint smile. "I'm Jake, Ryan's brother." "Jake? Brother?" I was stunned. Ryan had never mentioned having a sibling. "Oh, nice to meet you," I replied, trying to hide my confusion. Jake looked disheveled, wearing a wrinkled shirt and unkempt hair, but there was a sadness in his eyes that made me feel sorry for him. Later that day, I asked Ryan about Jake. "Why didn't you tell me you had a brother?" I asked. Ryan sighed. "Jake's complicated. He's a bit of a recluse. Don't worry about him. Just pretend he's not there." Pretend he's not there? That felt cold and dismissive. How could someone ignore their own sibling? But I decided not to push Ryan further. Sylvia, however, was more forthcoming. When I asked her about Jake, she sneered and said, "He's useless, a lazy ghost who hides in his room all day. Don't waste your time on him." Jake's presence intrigued me. He was quiet and kept to himself, but there was something about him that didn't align with the negative things Sylvia and Ryan said. Over the next few weeks, I noticed small acts of kindness from Jake. He'd quietly take out the trash or fix something around the house without saying a word. He never sought attention or praise, and it made me question the harsh judgments of Sylvia and Ryan. Meanwhile, my relationship with Ryan began to unravel. He became demanding and critical, often yelling at me for minor things. "Why is dinner so late?" Or, "Why didn't you iron my shirts properly?" Sylvia joined in, constantly pointing out my flaws. "Emily, you're a housewife now. Start acting like one." The love and respect I thought I had married into disappeared, replaced by coldness and cruelty. One night, after a particularly heated argument, I retreated to the guest room where I had started sleeping to avoid Ryan's wrath. As I sat on the bed, wiping away tears, there was a soft knock on the door. It was Jake. "I heard them yelling at you," he said softly. "Are you okay?" His concern surprised me. I nodded, though I was far from okay. "Thank you, Jake. I'll be fine." He hesitated before saying, "You deserve better than this. If you need help, just let me know." Then he left, closing the door gently behind him. That night, I couldn't sleep. Jake's words lingered in my mind. Did I really deserve better? Could I leave this toxic environment? The thought of starting over was terrifying, but staying felt unbearable. The turning point came a week later. Sylvia and Ryan accused me of not contributing enough to the household, despite the fact that I did all the cooking, cleaning, and errands. During their tirade, Sylvia said, "You're just a burden. We don't need you here." Ryan smirked and added, "Maybe you should leave if you can't handle it." Jake, who had been silently observing from the corner, finally spoke up. "Enough," he said firmly. His voice was calm, but carried an authority I hadn't seen before. "Emily doesn't deserve this treatment." Sylvia glared at him. "Stay out of this, Jake. You don't know anything." Actually, I do, Jake replied. I've lived in this house long enough to see how you treat people. It's disgusting. Ryan laughed mockingly. What are you going to do, Jake? You're just a loser who hides in his room. Jake's eyes narrowed. You have no idea who I am or what I'm capable of. Then he turned to me. Emily, pack your things. You don't have to stay here anymore. I hesitated, unsure if I had the courage to leave. But Jake's confidence gave me strength. Okay, I said, my voice trembling but resolute. Sylvia and Ryan tried to stop us, but Jake was prepared. If you try to interfere, he said, I'll make sure everyone knows how you've been treating Emily. And I'm not just talking about family. They fell silent, realizing Jake wasn't bluffing. We left that night, taking only what I could carry. Jake drove us to a small apartment he owned in the city. This is yours now, he said. You can stay here as long as you need. I was overwhelmed with gratitude. Thank you, Jake. But why are you helping me? He looked away, his expression somber. Because I've been where you are, trapped and helpless. No one deserves that. Over the next few weeks, Jake and I worked together to rebuild my life. He revealed that he wasn't the lazy ghost Sylvia had painted him to be. He was an accomplished software engineer who worked remotely and ran his own business. I stayed in that house because of a promise I made to my dad, he explained. But I can't keep that promise anymore. It's time to move on. Jake's support was unwavering. He helped me find a job as a graphic designer, a career I had dreamed of pursuing but abandoned when I married Ryan. He also encouraged me to seek therapy to heal from the emotional abuse I had endured. One day, as we were unpacking boxes in my new apartment, Jake said, You know, you're stronger than you think. It takes courage to walk away from a bad situation. His words stayed with me. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was starting to live. But the story didn't end there. Sylvia and Ryan weren't ready to let me go so easily. They began calling and texting relentlessly, demanding that I return. When I blocked their numbers, they showed up at my workplace causing a scene. You belong with us, Ryan shouted. You can't just leave. I stood my ground, refusing to be intimidated. I'm done with you, I said firmly. Leave me alone or I'll call the police. Jake, who had accompanied me to work that day, stepped in. You heard her. Leave or you'll regret it. His tone was calm but menacing, and for once, Ryan looked unsure of himself. Eventually, they backed off, but not without a final parting shot. You'll regret this, Emily, Sylvia sneered. You're nothing without us. Her words stung, but I knew they weren't true. I had Jake, a new job, and a fresh start. I didn't need them anymore. Months passed, and I flourished in my new life. Jake and I grew closer, our bond deepening with each passing day. He wasn't just my savior, he was my friend and confidant. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights, Jake turned to me and said, You know, Emily, I've always admired your strength. Even when things were tough, you never gave up. I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. I couldn't have done it without you, I replied. 2 years later, Jake proposed to me. He had been my rock during the darkest time of my life, and now he wanted to build a future together. I said yes without hesitation. Our love story wasn't conventional, but it was ours. And after everything we had been through, I knew we could face anything together. Looking back, I'm grateful for the challenges that led me to where I am today. They taught me resilience and showed me the power of kindness. Jake and I overcame the odds and found happiness in each other. And for that, I'll always be thankful.